The Strong Natural Museum of Play is doing another round of inductions of video games for their Video Game Hall of Fame. If you guys aren't aware, they've been doing this since around 2015, I think. They've been adding anywhere from 3 to 5 games a year. And, you know, the obvious choices are already in there, like Tetris is in there, Pac-Man's in there, Super Mario Brothers is in there. This year, they got like a solid batch of finalists for 2022. And it's actually at the first year where it's very interesting on which ones you think should go in. Because up until this point, it's been pretty much, you gotta put in the obvious choices. And now the obvious choice may not be so obvious. So, I'm here, diabetesNINJA.
Top of the morning.
And I thought we'd just sit down and look at the finalist. By the end of the month, it's gonna wrap up. There is a public voting that will count as one judge, and then, like, the Strong's committee will be other judges, and they'll ultimately decide. Yeah, we're just gonna sit here and look at these games and talk about which ones we think deserve to be in or not, and why, and who we're gonna vote for. I have yet to vote as of the recording of this video.
Now, I think that we're at an interesting point where I think that before we talk about specific games, what I think that I would like to do is just mention the notion that, you know, I don't know how many games they're deciding that they're going to put in every year, or if they even have a mandate about that. I think that similar to the way that the audience of video games exponentially cones out in size over time, I think a similar trajectory of growth should happen to the number of nominees who are allowed to be inducted every year. Because I think that if 3 or 5 is what we were doing in the past, in a couple of years, we should accelerate that and maybe admit to ourselves 20 years from now, there will be more than 100 games that deserve to be in this thing.
Oh, there's 100 games for sure that deserve to be in this thing right now, but you do these things, you know, at a slow pace. I'm looking at their website. I don't see where they're saying how many they're going to put in. It's just kind of like the list of games and a small, back-of-the-box write-up of what they are, you know? So, the games are, by the way, Assassin's Creed, Candy Crush Saga, Dance Dance Revolution, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Minesweeper, Mrs. Pac-Man, NBA Jam, Parappa the Rapper, Resident Evil, Rogue, Sid Meier's Civilization, Words with Friends. So, interestingly, they picked Assassin's Creed 1. And I think that's supposed to be more indicative of the franchise. I hope so, because Assassin's Creed 2 is the one that I hear everybody praise. I don't hear people talk about 1 a lot.
Okay, so I don't know if there is a best juncture to mention what I think is going on here, but we'll go ahead and do it now. I think each of these games represents a type of criteria by which a thing would get nominated. And I think that Assassin's Creed isn't just, we think this game is good enough. I think that this is them saying, oh, it is time to start nominating Gen 7 games. And we're going to start with things that have created a footprint that has, been expanded upon. Because from Assassin's Creed, we eventually got, things that were, Oblivion and Watch Dogs and, Far Cry, other much bigger and expansive, world-building exercises. And so I think that, Assassin's Creed is them identifying gigantic world building as an exercise that was, genuine. It was done best probably in Gen 7, and so it's time to start looking at those types of games and nominate games that do that specifically, starting with this, because that's what they're doing, right? Is putting in things that are foundational or set a template. And I think that a lot of the stuff that we see will, meet different criteria. And I think that that's what Assassin's Creed is here for.
Yeah, it's definitely here for the inspiration and the blueprint, not so much as for the game itself. I haven't seen Assassin's Creed 1 in probably a decade at this point, though, to be fair. So, for all I know, if I went back and played it, it holds up. But I'm pretty sure 2 and, whatever they called 3.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure 3 wasn't called 3. I'm pretty sure 3 was called something else.
So let's try this. Do we think some of these are red herrings and propounded for consideration?
I don't think so. Well, Candy Crush makes me question that, but we'll get to it.
Oh, well, Parappa the Rapper makes me think that.
I don't know, man.
I'll get into it later.
But Assassin's Creed, at face value, yay or nay, do you think it deserves to be in the Video Game Hall of Fame?
Okay, so this is a very non-transparent thing that they're doing where we can't tell if they're are they saying these are the games we think have traction, because there are installments that have more traction and have been weathered the sands of time better. So it isn't like the pinnacle, but it is the foundation. So if we're giving it thumbs up or thumbs down based on do we think it's foundational, it goes in automatically for the reasons I outlined earlier. Do we think that's what they're doing? All that we can do is make an educated guess. So is that what you think that they're doing?
No doubt.
Now, that's a different question than what would we do. Because I think that you and I would be like, no, 2 or 3 go in, not 1, since they are the height of the, they're the height of the series.
It's where it really finds its footing.
Well, it's where the quality of life expectancies exponentially shot up. And now if you tried to bring something to market that wasn't as good as Assassin's Creed 2, what are you talking about? Get it out of here.
Right. Yeah, but no, just don't. If you were just said Assassin's Creed 1 in the Hall of Fame, yes or no, and you were just to give a yes or no answer, would you be like, yeah, it belongs in there, or would you be like, no?
On a long enough timeline, we would know whether or not Assassin's Creed 1 was going to be there instead of the superior installments, and if they are going to not, because we don't have any instances where they take a series and then put in a bunch of games from the series, right? Do we know? Not because Zelda is in, but then, you know what? Here's the way we'll know. This is too soon of an argument to have. The Legend of Zelda is in. Ocarina of Time is up for consideration this year. I can't answer the question of whether or not Assassin's Creed 1 goes in until I see whether or not Ocarina of Time goes in. Because once we get 2 Zeldas, then we can know, okay, multiple installments from the same franchise can go in, even if it would be more appropriate to put in something else. And so we'll have more insight into what is their process even.
I will never get Ninja to just give me a yes or no answer to a yes or no question. It has never happened.
Okay, no.
Once.
Well, no.
Never
Do I have
once.
if I have a ballot? Yes.
You think it goes in? Okay.
Unless, of course, it's going to cost. Do we only get to put in how many of these?
Well, that was going to be the follow-up question. Do you think it just goes in on its own merits, separate of what's going on, and then do you think it goes in over the other games?
In a vacuum, yes. In a situation where it's costing something else the opportunity to go in, no.
I feel the same way. I feel I agree with that. All right. Candy Crush Saga. It's interesting to see this up for consideration because for a long time, people who identified as gamers really hated everything this stood for. Just like this casual boom in the market that made entire companies, kind of temporarily, walk away from AAA development as their main focus and put more money into, mobile games. And there's kind of, this is the start of, culture war, honestly, between, quote-unquote true gamers, which, I don't want to get political on this show, but honestly, gatekeeping is wrong. Please let people enjoy their games. As a man who has publicly played Red Ninja, I'm going to definitely side on the side with the people who are like, just play whatever you want. But like the quote-unquote real gamers versus like, you know, the casual soccer moms who discovered that video games are real fun, actually. So Candy Crush has it has like significance. As a game by itself, it's a match 3 puzzle. I don't think I've ever actually played Candy Crush, but I've seen it played. It's a match 3 puzzle. So it's got to be here 100% because of like how significant it was in drawing in huge amounts of people who otherwise wouldn't ever try gaming, and they're seeing video games as like a valid form of entertainment. So in a vacuum, do you think it belongs in the Video Game Hall of Fame?
Yes. Now, getting back to criteria, I think that part of what is being acknowledged here is that the words video game, the definition is being expanded, and I welcome this because the argument that video games needs different kinds of money not here and we only want money from like truest gamers is ridiculous, because I don't know if that just ignores how anything can afford to be made in the first place. I think this is automatic, has to go in at some point. You could argue that there are more deserving things in line, but that's not what we're doing here, right? Like, in a vacuum, I think it goes in, and in the greater macro sense, I also think it goes in.
Yeah, they mentioned here that they're crediting it with popularizing the emergent free-to-play distribution model, and that it had 3 billion downloads, which is fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's hard to say no to one of the like seminal...
Billion with a B.
Well, yeah, because I think that here's the other thing we have to like take into account. This isn't just numbers in terms of number of people. Regionally, like, a lot of people's first video game was that, and whenever it's a lot of people's introductory experience, that is important to creating avenues. And I think that avenue creation is one of the criteria where which you would like let things in. So I'm automatic yes. I don't play it. I don't want to play it. Also, it's not at me. It doesn't mean that it's like not good for the industry. Like, yeah, automatic yes for me.
I don't think it's an automatic yes for me. I don't like the free-to-play model.
Here's the thing, though. Like, we ended up still getting Final Fantasy VII Remake and Devil May Cry 5. So it's like, we got Resident Evil 7 and 8. What was kept from you because of Candy Crush? Nothing?
You're arguing against arguments I haven't even made. Although, those are arguments that have been made, so...
If you mention it, these are the arguments that crop up eventually. I'm, getting ahead of the argument. You are right.
Ahead of the curve. I think on a long enough timeline, this gets in, and I'm okay with this getting in. I think there's a spot for it. In this list, though, I think it goes on the bottom. I think I almost put any of these other games ahead of it.
Okay, so because we already have a Pac-Man, I think that having Ms. Pac-Man 2 takes a backseat to this.
We'll get there in a minute. Game number 3. Dance Dance Revolution. They mentioned the arcade one from 98. They have a picture of the PlayStation, American PlayStation game. And I know not a lot of people were this. The American Dance Dance Revolution is pretty fucking different from the Japanese arcade game and the Japanese PlayStation release.
I look at that as being a credit to the franchise, though, because it is a template that survives translation to every cultural, like, you can literally, if an alien race came here and were like, explain to us what video games are, you would show them a few different examples. This would be one of them. It, like, visually communicates, and you can translate it to any other culture, and it can be gotten. And so, for me, it's an automatic include, the same way that Candy Crush is an automatic include.
Dance Dance Revolution probably gets my actual vote. But I'm a huge fan of the series. It basically, it didn't invent music games, but it is the doom of music games. Beatmania is Wolfenstein, but DDR is what took that genre and made it actually viable. You're right in that it works in every culture. All you gotta do is change out the songs, And I find that even its original Japanese song list, if you just present it as is, you know, you don't try to over-explain it, or you don't try to, like, talk people into being okay with Japanese music, most Americans just enjoy it anyway as this, like, weird novelty, well, look at this, and then they have a lot of fun with it anyway. I never liked Konami's efforts to try to, like, replace the song selections with more quote-unquote Americanized music. Well, we're getting into the weeds. This is very much meant to be representative of the series, because DDR First Mix is, like, hands down the worst version of the game you could play. But as long as they're talking about, like, it as a series, like, if, you know, I can visualize that we're talking about DDR 1, 2, and 3, this is automatically in for me. I would have been okay if this was a year one game, honestly. This could have been next to Tetris, Mario, Doom, as, like, foundational genre-defining games.
So, even though I agree, I think that the thing that I was talking about, exponentially coning out the number of nominees that are allowed in every year, like, this is part of the argument for that, because if we're letting in 3 games, dude, it's rough, and you're going to have disagreements among the people about which 3 should get in. I think that there are going to be a number of people who thinks that among the nominees that we have this year, that this makes it in there if you only nominate 3. And there are going to be a lot of people who say no to that as well.
Well, the only argument you can really put against it, especially from, like, an American viewpoint, is that DDR isn't the music game that caught fire Guitar Hero is. We had, like, 1 year right as Guitar Hero was coming out where DDR was the biggest game. Well, one of the biggest games in the landscape, like, early 2006. There were a lot of, like, news pieces about it, being, like, a exercise program. And Supernova caught wildfire in arcades. It was, like, the number 1 selling arcade game of the year, I think. And then Guitar Hero came out and somehow made music games even bigger. So I think a lot of people remember Guitar Hero, and then they remember the whole genre more or less dying out. But I don't know. I think giving DDR the nod and all that is appropriate. So, in a vacuum, yes. And this list, yes. I think we're more or less on the same page. I just have a lot more fanboyism to say about it.
Well, see, here's the thing. If the agenda is, alright, we're only letting in 3, and we want maximum kinds of representation, it fits especially well within that because it... I don't know, man. Like, a different group is represented by people who would want that than the ones who would, like, want, say, Ms. Pac-Man, Minesweeper, or Candy Crush. You know what I mean? Like, it's... Yeah. We want representation. We want the full definition of video gamers to be represented, I think. And so it brings people into the tent. And when I say people, I mean money. Like, it brings, like, money to the industry. The industry needs money.
Here's a hot take. Without Dance Dance Revolution, arcades in America died 10 years ahead of time.
I don't have any evidence to the contrary.
I don't really have hard evidence to support that. I
know that's not what I said. I don't have evidence to the contrary. You know what I mean? Like,
I just feel like that's true. I feel like fighting games kind of exited, and games like DDR kept them up. Like, well, I mean, like, even Round 1 and Dave & Buster's are, like, the 2 surviving arcade chains that we have. And by contracts, each one of them has to have at least one of those games. Anyhow, The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, yes, that's how I pronounce it. Assuming they mean the original 64 version and not the remakes. This one's a hot... I expect to spend the most time talking about this one, but I really don't have that much to say or add to the conversation. I've always been a defender of the game. I recognize its detractors. I recognize everything Egoraptor's ever said about it. I recognize the excellent remake or rebreak video that Exoparadigm Gamer did on it. And every single criticism he levies against it is true. You guys can go watch that. It's not a perfect game by any means, but some would say it's the most important game of all time. You got thoughts on Ocarina?
Automatic include for me. I think that this is going to be very telling because there are a number of ways that you will be able to better read the tea leaves based on whether or not this goes in. If we're talking about being foundational, I think that, it informs design moving forward on everything like that's anything like it. And so if you wanted to like include it for that reason, it gets in. If you wanted to measure like does it get traction, do people who play it still want to play it 20 years from now? The answer to that is yes, by and large. And although the game does have detractors, what I found is that it seems to have fewer detractors every year. And what that tells me is that the people who have reverence for it never change their mind, and people who don't move on and just find other targets not to have reverence for.
If this gets in, everyone's going to demand that Majora's Mask gets in next year.
And they'll be wrong to want that in back-to-back years.
This is a weird thing where I'm okay if Ocarina of Time waits a few more years to get in.
I think that the order that you have to put the Zelda games in following this now would have to be Breath of the Wild next. And, you know, I just think that, like, doing Majora's Mask, I think that couldn't even take priority over Skyward Sword. I don't think it takes... Once again, I guess, like, Zelda fans can, like, you know, fight...
You could definitely tell Ninja has not dove into the discourse of Zelda, like, what the best Zelda game is right now.
Full disclosure, I don't jump into discourse. There's nothing to be gained.
Dude, nobody agrees with you on what you just said, is what I'm going to tell you, but I don't think it's without merit. I think you can make the argument Breath of the Wild is a way better game than Majora's Mask.
Well, no, because the thing is, like, bigger tentpole, right? Like, Breath of the Wild reaches a different, bigger audience. You know? Like,
man, it's unfortunate this video will not be seen by many people. And by unfortunate, I mean very fortunate, because it would be thumbs down so hard.
Thank you, YouTube, for taking away the thumbs down option, by the way.
Oh, I used the Chrome extension to re-edit.
Oh.
I'm not a coward, guys. You can slam me, I'll take it to the chin. Anyway, Minesweeper. And this is on your daddy's Dell computer. Everyone's played it. Everyone's fucked around with it. Microsoft Minesweeper.
So I don't feel pressure to say yes on this one, because it feels like there's like an air of inevitability, right? Like, this goes in eventually. There's no need to rush. Also, there's no constituency who's gonna, like, die of sadness if it doesn't go in this year because of that air of inevitability.
You were talking about possibly the idea that they put in games knowing they weren't going to get in, just to, like, pad the list or whatever. Minesweeper's that game, if we have them. Minesweeper is a fantastic little puzzle game that nobody understands the rules to, that everyone's kind of fucked around with, and then that it is what it is. You only went out of your way to play it because it was free and on the machine you were already using. People don't talk about this game for a reason.
So, I think that Pete Rose is more famous for the fact that he is never going to go into the Hall of Fame than he ever would have been if he'd have made it into the Hall of Fame of baseball. So, you know what's funny? I don't think that a Hall of Fame would ever engineer a situation like that. But this actually, like, makes me think, you know what? Do you think that there will one day be a point in time where they make an exclusion that they intend to be a conversation point?
No, you're reading too deeply into this. I can already tell. I think somebody on the board was just like, Minesweeper, man, everyone recognizes the name, so it deserves to be on here, and I'm going to hard disagree with them. I think in a vacuum, I could give or take Minesweeper, but I think on this list, it's a hard no, and honestly, maybe in a vacuum, maybe it's a pretty solid no even then.
Oh, yeah, so if we got 8 nominees and only 3 of them make it in, this one's the first one off the island.
Yeah, stretcher the shit out of this. Put on the stretcher and move it the fuck out.
Goes in one day, though. I still contend goes in one day.
I don't even think that. I think after this year, they don't even try to put it back up. We'll see. Mrs. Pac-Man. Mrs. Pac-Man is a better game than the original Pac-Man. I don't think that's a hot take. I felt like that's a take I took straight out of the freezer.
I feel like that's a near... Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's a near unanimous agreement that you're going to get from people.
The only reason why Namco doesn't release this as many times as the original Pac-Man isn't because the original Pac-Man's iconic or whatever. It's because the copyrights for it are, like, nebulous. and belonged to, like, another company. Namco Bandai actually co-owns Mrs. Pac-Man because it was a hack of Pac-Man that Midway got to publish themselves. And, like, the hackers basically kept, like, the rights to the idea of a female Pac-Man.
So, this actually also brings up the topic of conversation about, is this a vote for hacks and mods?
I don't think it's being perceived that way.
Well, you want to know what?
They don't
like,
mention it. They mention it as a sequel. They do not mention it. That it was.
Well, I tell you what.
Called Crazy Auto.
Well, we'll check it out though. The thing is though, if there ends up being another thing that receives consideration in future years, that is, like anything that happened to Counter-Strike that ended up being something else later, I think those things receive more consideration, and this sets a precedent, whether that's an unintended consequence or not. I think this would be the first one where a mod or hack gets in, and so I'm kind of rooting for it on that level. But, once again, if we're nominating 3 of the 8, maybe I still put it in. I think that actually it probably still makes it into the top 3 of these 8 for me. And the reason why is whenever you induct something into a Hall of Fame, you want to know what's really clean. Being able to say a single sentence and have it carry enough weight that people don't have to ever see the game to know why people care about the game. Ms. Pac-Man is one of the 5 best games ever made.
Ooh.
So...
Ooh. I have a lot of nostalgia for this one. We had one of the cocktail machines at my local laundromat, and I played the fuck out of it as a child. And when we got, like, somebody gifted us a Commodore 64, and we had the Mrs. Pac-Man floppy, and I played the shit out of that. And then I played the shit out of it again on the Namco Museum Volume 3. I love this game. Feel like it's very easy answers. Does it belong in the Hall of Fame? You're saying yes.
Oh, yeah, if we narrow it down to 3 for this year, and only 3 are getting in, Ms. Pac-Man is my first thing that I write in there, and I wrestle with myself about the other 2.
I think it's better than Mr. Pac-Man. I think it's better than the original. The original
it's
got
inevitable
in because of the, representing the franchise,
But we do think that there is an air of inevitability, like I thought about Minesweeper with this, right? There's no...
This gets in eventually.
This can't be on the ballot for more than 2 years.
This probably gets in this year.
It couldn't possibly... There are no scenarios where this waits more than 2 years.
Right. NBA Jam. And I'm assuming they mean the original 4-player arcade machine. And this is good shit. Obviously, Tournament Edition... what was the arcade one called? NBA Jam 2000?
Oh, no. It was just NBA Jam OG whenever it first came out, and then Tournament Edition was like a iterative upgrade, similar to like Championship Edition was to Street Fighter.
I'm trying to remember if they used Tournament Edition, the name, in the arcades, or if that was console. Okay. Because I do know there's an NBA Jam 2000.
That's a different game. Doesn't have anything to do with NBA Jam.
It doesn't. Okay, I'm going to...
No, that was console only. I never seen... If that ever came out in arcades, I'd never seen it in real life.
Oh, okay.
I only ever seen that on N64.
Either way, I felt bad for almost saying no to this one. It's a very iconic game. Everyone I know loves it. It was a big deal in arcades. They have it released in... Or they say it's released in 1993. I probably saw it a couple of years later, honestly. It's super fun, especially if you get to play with 4 players. It's one of the only one-up arcade machines I really want to have. I don't know if it stands with some of these others. I don't know if NBA Jam is that good of a game. I think in a vacuum, if you were like, there's a video game Hall of Fame, NBA Jam, is it in or out? I'd probably say, yeah, go ahead and put it in.
All right,
I don't know, when you're looking at the rest of these, if you give it the thumbs up.
Okay, now see, here's the thing. This isn't even necessarily just aimed at casuals. This is aimed at a very specific kind of arcade customer from a very specific point in time. And this almost feels like what we're really voting on is, do people who used to go to the arcade in 92 even get to vote? That's almost like what we're really doing here is saying, well, listen, man, like, we want to, like, honor the fact that that was, like, an era in video games' history, and this is a representative from that time. Quality-wise, it's, you know, I don't know. It didn't, like, influence game design or nothing like that. But you want to know what? Like, there's a particular type of arcade customer who will, like, remember it fondly. That isn't where my barrier of entry into a Hall of Fame is, right? Like, is that good enough? Because, like, the question isn't, do you like it? Because, like, that is not the barrier of entry for a Hall of Fame, is do you like it?
Right. I think it doesn't influence game design. I think it influenced game aesthetic. I think it's aesthetic, like, the Blitz series doesn't really take off without the template of NBA Jam.
I know, but the aesthetic
we don't get, like, the extreme sports games of the PlayStation 1 and 2 era.
Well, yeah, it was
NBA Jam.
It was an aesthetic for a particular part of time, and you want to know what? Like, the customer base evolved to where that aesthetic doesn't speak to them.
It's hella... It's like the 80s interpretation of what the 90s were about, almost.
Well, yeah, like, because, like, broadcast cable is, like, what we were rocking back then, right? And so it got, like, pretty close.
And they added Jazzy Jeff into the game eventually. That's the kind of aesthetic we're talking about.
Well, yeah, if you ain't lived until you slam dunked with Bill Clinton, like...
Oh, my God. I'm kind of talking myself into being okay with it now.
Oh, well...
It's a fun game. I love the game. I just don't... I mean, it's next...
See, this is the red herring for me.
It's fucking... Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Mrs. Pac-Man, and fucking DDR. You know, I just don't think NBA Jam gets the slam dunk this year.
Well, yeah, like, the thing is, Hall of Fames are supposed to be like, look at this transcendent thing that either informs design moving forward or stands the test of time really well and could never be duplicated. The magic that you could get from this is found other better places, and we actually prefer what came later. And so the way that Zelda guys entrench themselves into, like, whatever iteration that they liked the best, I don't know, man. Like, the people who did NBA Jam, I don't know, man. They don't, like, it doesn't get the same traction. It doesn't, it's like casual loyalty rather than zealotry.
It's more like, it's not that buddy in college you don't ever think about, and then somebody brings him up, and you're like, yeah, I fucking love that guy. But then, like, you know in about 5 minutes you're going to stop thinking about him and go on with your life.
Oh, yeah, they're like, yeah, that guy is cool. End of conversation.
And, alright, so I guess that guy is cool. Moving on. Parappa the Rapper. Look, it's hard for me to hate Parappa. And there's a good argument that, it was one of the earlier, like, hits for the Sony PlayStation. It's got its own aesthetic and vibe. The only people I know who really love this game are people who played it when they were young. Like, I don't think this game ever had, like, an adult audience. It's aimed for younger kids, you know? Real catchy soundtrack, but, you know, I think there's only, like, 6 songs in the game. Well, see, I'm going off memory, guys. So.
Here, I'm gonna help because you're being a little bit too kind. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and jump in there. So, similar to the way that you want entries to be clean and be able to explain themselves and what they are and why they belong, I think it's easy to disqualify this game because where DDR informed game design within that space forever moving forward, Parappa the Rapper informed design space for Unjammer Lammy, and like now we're like done.
Its own sequel,
right? And so I think that the list of music games that go in before this are so numerous that whole thing about are there red herrings that they intend for us to throw out the back door? Like,
Guitar Hero goes in before here. Rock Band goes in before here. Beat Mania.
and you know what? If we only get one music game every 2 years, this goes in 15 years or something like that, because there's no, in a year where DDR's up, sorry, any other music game, sorry.
The only music game I want to hear you make an argument for is the original Beat Mania. Otherwise, fuck off with that shit.
Well, see, like, the thing is, though, people aren't as familiar.
Yeah, DDR is way more iconic.
Yeah, so I was going to say, Beat Mania may even be better than DDR, but it's not more popular, famous, or money-making.
So, go ahead and stretch your Parappa the Rapper.
We don't hate you, by the way. We don't hate Parappa the Rapper.
I hum the soundtrack to myself constantly.
Worth revisiting. Even buy a copy if you find one for cheap. Not in my Hall of Fame.
Kick, punch, it's all in the mind, and not in the Hall of Fame. Resident Evil, the PlayStation 1 version.
Automatic include. I'm not even going to defend this.
Fucking high five, dude. I did not want to have to be the guy sitting here trying to talk people into Resident Evil. This is my other, this is my other vote. If I get the vote 3, this is the other one in. And I could be talked into voting it over DDR. Because as much as I love music games, I have to remember that genre kind of died by 2010. Survivor Horror has only gotten better. And it basically all starts here.
Yeah, see, this is the sad thing about music games, is that improved interfaces don't really help music games that much. Improved technological prowess helps this genre more than any other, probably. Like, maybe sandboxes benefit more from increases in technological capacity, but, dude, survival horror, like, Jesus, how much better did these get? And this is great on its own. It's foundational, sets, like, templates, stands the test of time. Like, no matter what angle you want to look at this from, automatic include, this is...
We are still referencing the original Resident Evil. We're still checking on it to see if, we're following its blueprint. 30-something years after the fact.
Here's another, unofficial way of looking at it. How many movies have been made about the game? Dude, you almost...
One released this year, actually.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at, is, you almost put this in the Hall of Fame because of how many Mila Jovovich movies there are. The industry is richer and better, and the tentpole is higher because of this franchise, even if it's just, an accident of, campy movies having a life of their own.
It also, because Justice is not here to, say this, it also defines and sets tank controls, which we don't really use now much anymore, but that defined pretty much any action or tense horror setting action game for 2 generations.
Oh yeah,
PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 really use that blueprint moving forward. Yeah,
similar to the way that video game developers make sure that jumps last as high in the air and allow you as much control as Mario. Tank controls were modeled after this game. It informed game design space for like Lars said, 20 years. There's not
30.
If you have a compelling,
we're old.
Well, you always want to round down whenever you're as old as we are. No, but if you have a compelling argument against Resident Evil, God, let us hear about it. It's hard to hear a compelling argument against it.
I actually have right here the original Japanese release, Biohazard. The last time I read through this game, it was the Japanese one. And it's a hoot, man. It still has the English voice acting, so you don't miss out on any of the memes. Rogue. The original Rogue. The fucking 1980 Rogue. I've never played this game. I know it from its legacy because it invented the entire fucking rogue genre. It's where the terms roguelite and roguelike and all that shit come from. I kind of don't like roguelites. It's kind of a genre that I always found a little bit tedious.
Okay, well, you invited me to go on discourse with my opinion.
Oh, well, here we go.
No.
Are you guys ready to hear some Diabetes Ninja?
No. I'm just saying, go on the internet and be like, roguelites and roguelikes are overrated. Just say that on the internet. Like, not a good genre, and like get at Lar.
It's a fine genre. I'm sure the way I felt about DDR being on this list is the way the majority of gamers feel about Rogue being on this list. If you're old enough to remember Rogue being its own game at one point, this is probably an automatic lock for you.
Once again, I'm like still trying to make the argument for exponentially coning out the number of nominees that can be put in. I think that next year, we ought to just take 10 legacy picks and get them out of the way. Quit effing around and acting like Tetris doesn't belong in there. Quit acting like Pitfall isn't eventually going to make it in. Quit acting like, Load Runner doesn't make it in eventually. Like, quit pretending all those things and just go ahead and for a couple of years, grab 10 of these, like, essential, like, pivotal foundational games and just go ahead and, like, put them in. Don't even bother making people vote them in over other considerations, because it's hard whenever you're Rogue and then you look over to your right and there's, like, DDR and Ms. Pac-Man. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, shit, I am sad that I dressed up in a tux. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, man. I think that this game makes me want to just expedite the process, that we take the foundational givens and just go ahead and throw them in there all at one time. Don't make people vote. You'd be ridiculous not to think that it deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Like, let's just go ahead and put these games in there. Why even make it why make this an episode of Survivor, dude? Like, how you gonna send Rogue home early? You know what I mean? Like, that's rough.
More so my enjoyment, or more so how I view Rogue. It just feels like my ancestor spirits will not rest easy if I don't eventually put it in the Hall of Fame. That's like the vibe this entry has.
Well, once again,
you're doing this for Pappy.
Well, yeah, and so the thing is, that's why I'm like being very careful to say, listen, if we're down to 3 and I have to pick 3, this doesn't come close to getting in there. Also, why am I having to make this decision? We shouldn't have to parse this. This is like...
You feel like when they opened the Hall of Fame, this should have just been in there before the doors unlocked?
There are 25 games that should have just automatically been in there.
Okay. I don't necessarily disagree with that. Yeah, I don't think it gets my vote either. I won't be sad to see it get in. As a matter of fact, I expect this one to get in. I 100% expect this one to make it in. Sid Meier's Civilization, the original PC version. I did not play it until Civilization 2 on the PlayStation 1. And then my dad played the fuck out of Civilization 3. And I saw a bunch of that growing up as a kid. And then more recently, Morty had played a lot of Civilization 5 and got me and Isaac into it. So I've played a fair deal of 5 multiplayer. And 5 multiplayer is fucking stupid, bonkers, horseshit. But, I mean, it's a good legacy franchise. Civilization basically popularizes, real-time strategy that includes its own economy. Does this predate The Sims? I think...
Oh, by a lot.
Yeah, 1991. Okay, yeah. So this predates The Sims. Not The Sims, like SimCity. But I think SimCity's 92 or 93. I can't really think of a game that did what it did before, and if there is one, it definitely didn't popularize it like this. This is a pretty good inclusion. I think on a long enough timeline, Civ gets in eventually.
Alright, so I'm going to be ceding to you and relying on the viewpoint of people, because similar to the way that there are people who maybe wouldn't otherwise be like identified as gamers except for Candy Crush, there are on the opposite end of the like cognitive like Spectrum, people who almost exclusively play these types of like, strategy games where
for a whole significant group of gamers, this is video gaming.
Right.
Games like this.
Right. You know what I mean? They don't really operate much outside of the RTS space.
It also is what solidified PC gaming as a force in the 90s.
Well, yeah, it speaks to a particular type of customer. And so whenever I think about some of these nominations, I think that what they're really signaling is like, we want to acknowledge whenever a thing created an avenue, because there wasn't the type of customer that Candy Crush had until Candy Crush, and there isn't the type of customer for video games that this game creates until this game came out. And so it's an avenue creation. The only thing that gives me pause is similar to how Assassin's Creed 1, if you tell me if we voted in, we don't get Assassin's Creed 2, okay, well we're not going to vote in Assassin's Creed 1 then. So I think that you could probably engage the community and they could sort out which civilization belongs in, until we start letting several installments from the same series, like, until that, like, becomes commonplace. Because right now we don't have any examples yet, until we get Ms. Pac-Man in addition to Pac-Man, until we get Final Fantasy VII in addition to Final Fantasy VI, and Ocarina of Time in addition to Legend of Zelda.
Shit, we gotta get Final Fantasy VI in there first.
Oh, I thought 6 was in.
No, Final Fantasy, there's not a single Final Fantasy in there. I will double check right now.
I thought 6 was in.
Final Fantasy VII is in, not...
Yeah, okay. Well, the same thing stands. Until we, have...
Why did we fucking put 7 in over 6? What the shit?
Oh, avenue creation.
You're right. I mean, I know the answer to my own question. I just also think it's a better game.
Yeah, because the thing is, here's the thing. 20% of people 20% of SNES people played 6. 102% of PlayStation 1 people played Final Fantasy VII. And yes, I know that sounds impossible. What I'm saying is, I know non-PlayStation 1 owners who went out of their way to find a way to play Final Fantasy VII somehow, So I just...
Yeah.
They either borrowed a PlayStation, or they played it on PC, or they played it on a normal... You know what I mean? It's transcendent. And so sometimes...
But not getting into that, because we'll be here all day.
Back on topic.
On Civilization, I don't know which one's considered the best.
Yeah, you have to engage the community. Yeah, I'm not qualified to speak on it.
If Woody were here, I think he said 3 was his favorite, 3 or 4.
Regardless of the discourse, though, if we're narrowing it down to 3 from these 8, I don't put it in.
I don't vote it in, but in a vacuum, if you asked if Civilization deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, I'd say yes.
Oh, one of them does, and I don't... Yeah. Once again, I'll have to, let other people sort out which one deserves to go in first.
Probably 2. Anyhow... Words with Friends. Let's read what they wrote real quick. Because I only know this from the Big Bang Theory sketch with Stephen Hawkins. For millions of people, Words with Friends was the first game they ever played on a smartphone. Launched in 2009, the game's simple, turn-based, asynchronous gameplay inspired by Scrabble, connected friends and family members in new and playful ways. Pop culture sensation, wide demographic, 13 years after its release, continues to attract millions of monthly users. So apparently the game's still going strong. For a mobile game, that's actually a really big accomplishment.
I'm not familiar with this product at all. I'm going to put a question out there and then do research.
It's free to play Scrabble. It's free to play Scrabble that you play with other people online.
Okay, so here I am curious.
Put it on the stretcher.
The average.
Put it on the stretcher. Get the fuck out.
Oh no! Thumbs down. It doesn't. it doesn't go in because it. Culturally, it doesn't make the same kind of impact as any of the other 7 on this list. But here's the other thing that I'm curious. Is this real aimed at big brain, young but not quite out of college people? I'm is this?
Well, this was Stephen Hawking's favorite video game. Apparently, he legit played this all the time. That's why they did the Big Bang Theory sketch. It's he was already playing the game.
It's actually funny because I always say, man, sometimes you're getting in a fight, but then the other guy's like Mike Tyson. it feels like running into Stephen Hawking on Words with Friends. Like, God, that's
Dude, you're getting your ass fucking tore off.
That's what I'm saying. What a bad beat. Like, what the hell? I gotta contend with fucking Stephen Hawking? Why? That's how you, like, know you're gonna have a bad day. It's like, oh, I was gonna win, but then I, like, ran into Stephen Hawking in Words with Friends. So, I'm not familiar enough with this, but you wanna know what? Hall of Fames are supposed to be full of stuff that you are familiar with. I almost look at, like, the fact that it doesn't inform future design, philosophy. It doesn't, like, nobody I know plays it. I don't know, dude. Maybe this is, like, non-representative of what's out there.
I'm going to have to personally give this a no, even in a vacuum. Even in a vacuum, if you're like, Words with Friends, Hall of Fame, I'd probably look at you weird and say no.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if it's good enough, then we'll hear about it later. And I suspect this will never be talked about again. We will not be, if this doesn't make if it doesn't win, if it doesn't get in this year, I doubt that we ever talk about it again.
If it gets in this year, I want explanations.
It depends on what they left out. Like,
yeah, because they put, like, imagine they put that Candy Crush and Minesweeper in.
Oh, well, okay, so if words...
We will have a video, and it will be full of salt and vinegar.
Oh, no, I'm letting you know right now, if Words with Friends gets in, the other 7 get in.
So, yeah, that's all the games. We're approaching the end of this video. It's almost an hour long.
Alright, so what are your 3? Real quick.
My 3, real quick, in order, I think DDR absolutely needs to get in. I think Resident Evil absolutely needs to get in. And then looking at the rest of these, I want to say Mrs. Pac-Man, but honestly, I think Ocarina of Time kind of deserves it a little bit more. And I know that's weird to say, and I feel like I betrayed my mother.
If you made me vote blindly to where I didn't know that Pac-Man was in, I would go Ms. Pac-Man, Oot, Resident Evil. But you want to know what?
Don't pronounce O-O-T.
Yeah, I think that it would probably, if I had to choose 3, I would hate to see DDR go, but I think that it would go Ms. Pac-Man, Ocarina of Time, Resident Evil, but because of the fact that Pac-Man is in, and I do know that, I take Ms. Pac-Man, save that for another day, and I go Dance Dance Revolution, Ocarina of Time, Resident Evil.
Holy shit. We didn't plan that, guys. We did not plan to pick the same 3 games. I didn't think you would do DDR.
Oh, for all the reasons I said, like, it's an automatic, like, checks every box. Every single box.
I'm glad because, I'm not gonna lie, guys, I'm have personal feelings about Dance Dance Revolution, so it's good to see somebody who doesn't even play the games be like, no, that's a good choice.
Oh, no, trying to act against it would be like, nah, man, I think that the weather's fine in the middle of a tornado. Like, it's no, you can only, like, ignore your surroundings so much. It's like a cultural touchstone.
Hell yeah. Well, I don't think we get the vote for 3. I think we only get the vote for 1. DDR is going to be my 1.
Oh, man, that's a much harder conversation.
But we're going to go ahead and vote. We'll probably do a follow-up video on this at the beginning of next month, talking about what got in and, like, the greater list as a whole. So
DDR gets your 1 vote, is what you're saying?
DDR's getting my 1 vote.
Oh, man.
If not, it's Resident Evil. But
dude, yeah, God, Resident Evil does get my vote if I only get to vote for 1. I would be mad if I only got to vote for 1, and I hate to keep going back to the thing that I suggested, because it just seems like I'm just here to, like, do my own agenda. But for real, like, we need to expand this thing. We need to expedite it and make it to where more games make it in every year. Because, this is, like, not... Like, there are gonna be things that fall off the docket, and there'll be travesties, and maybe the Pete Rose not being in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame thing is what they're gonna go for. But Laura doesn't seem to think they're being meta like that.
No, I don't think so.
If they're not, let's go ahead and expand this thing, dude. It's time to expand. Pack the courts, whatever the Hall of Fame video game version is.
Oh my god. Okay, well, this video is gonna be uploaded probably a few days before public voting gets cut off. So if you're watching this pretty new, go vote. If you're watching this afterwards, we'll probably either have or we'll have in the pipeline another video talking about what got in, how we feel about it, and the Hall of Fame as a whole. But those are our thoughts on the on the inductees for 2022. I kind of wanted to do a video like this last year, and then we just didn't get to do it. So I'm glad we got to do it this year.
I'd like to thank you guys for your time. Feel free to hit the like button and click the subscribe and notification buttons.
Yeah, if you guys like videos like this, definitely let us know, because we mostly do Let's Plays.
Also, if you hate this video, let us know that too, man. We really are socially awkward and just want people to talk to.
True that.